Welcome to the Deep Dive from the All Sorts podcast. This is where we take one topic, just one, and really unpack it for you, drawing on a whole stack of sources.
Yeah, the idea is to cut through the noise,
Yeah.
give you those fascinating insights without you having to wade through everything yourself.
Exactly. Think of it as your curated path to understanding something complex, maybe even finding something completely unexpected along the way.
Hopefully have a bit of fun doing it.
Definitely. Today, we're traveling way back. We're looking at anatomy in the ancient world.
A big topic.
Yeah.
How different cultures tried to figure out the human body.
It's this deep, enduring curiosity we have, isn't it, about ourselves, how we work.
It really is. And it's humbling when you think about these ancient civilizations without our tech, asking those same basic questions.
Absolutely. And hey, if you're enjoying this journey with us on the All Sorts podcast, exploring these connections, well, just imagine the universe of other deep dives waiting for you.
There's quite a library building up now.
There really is. Search for the All Sorts podcast on YouTube. Seriously, go check it out. You'll find explorations into, well, all sorts of things, like what you hear. Hit like, share it, subscribe. Help us light up the world with curiosity.
Become part of the discovery.
Exactly. And for those little sparks, those behind-the-scenes bits, follow All Sorts podcast on X, Instagram, and Threads. Think of it like joining this vibrant network, this community, all sharing this thirst for knowledge. We'd love you to be part of that.
Definitely.
So with that, where do we begin this ancient anatomical journey?
Let's start in ancient India. It's one of the oldest civilizations, and, well, their contributions to medicine were pretty significant early on.
Ancient India.
Okay.
What makes their view of anatomy stand out?
Well, you have Ayurvedic medicine, which comes from Vedic philosophies. It's genuinely one of the oldest systems of medicine we have documented records for.
Ayurveda, right. I think most people have heard the term. Are there specific texts we should know about?
There are two main foundational texts, the Susruta Samhita and the Charaka Samhita. Both give us a really good window into how they saw the body.
Okay, and for today's deep dive, are we focusing on one?
Yes, let's zoom in on the Susruta Samhita. It's attributed to Susruta, probably around the 6th century BCE. He taught at the University of Benares and is often called the father of Indian surgery.
Wow, the father of Indian surgery, 6th century BCE. That's quite a title. How important did he think anatomy was for surgeons?
Oh, absolutely crucial. He was very clear you couldn't be a good surgeon without knowing anatomy inside out. He even advocated for human dissection.
Human dissection back then in India, how did that work with, potential religious objections?
That's a really important point. Hindu beliefs did hold the body sacred, even after death. Cutting a corpse was generally forbidden, and cremation was the norm.
So how did Susruta manage it?
He developed this really remarkable method. Instead of cutting, he recommended using a specific type of brush, like a broom, to carefully scrape away the skin and flesh, layer by layer.
Scrape it away with a brush.
Yeah. It was a way to study the layers, the structures, without technically violating the taboo against cutting the corpse. Shows real dedication, doesn't it? Inventing a whole new technique.
That's incredibly clever, actually. What kind of bodies did they use, and how did they prep them for this brushing?
The Samhita specifies choosing a body that wasn't poisoned, didn't die of a chronic disease, and was under 100 years old. The bowels needed to be cleaned out first.
Okay.
Then the body was wrapped in materials like grass or bark, put in a cage, and submerged in a river with a gentle current in a secluded spot for about 7 days to decompose.
Decompose in a river, then brushed. Wow. So what did they learn using this method?
Quite a lot, actually. The Susruta Samhita describes over 300 bones, different kinds of joints, ligaments, muscles. Now, some think the bone count might be a bit high.
Why is that?
Possibly because they might have observed children's bodies where bones haven't fused yet, so they'd count more individual pieces.
Yeah.
But still, their understanding of the skeleton, muscles, even blood vessels was pretty advanced for the time.
It's just astonishing given the method. Were there specific surgeries they described that really show off this anatomical knowledge?
Oh, absolutely. Rhinoplasty nose reconstruction is a famous one. Susruta described what we'd now call a free flap technique.
A free flap back then.
Yeah. Taking skin from the cheek, using a leaf as a template for the shape, completely detaching it, preparing the nose stump, and attaching the graft. It relies on the body regrowing blood supply into the flap, which is a complex idea.
That's incredible.
And he even mentioned inserting small pipes into the nostrils afterwards so the person could breathe while it healed and the graft wouldn't collapse inward.
Just amazing foresight. What else?
Earlobe repair was another one. Torn earlobes were common, apparently from heavy earrings or stretching.
Right.
Sesruda described using a pedicle flap from the cheek. That's where you keep the skin attached at one end to preserve its blood supply, rotate it, and use it to rebuild the lobe. Again, shows real understanding of blood flow and facial structure.
They really understood tissues and how they worked. Any other areas?
Yes, ophthalmology too. Cataracts were common. Sesruda described the eye having different elements and layers. His cataract surgery description is quite detailed.
Like what?
Preparing the patient, maybe using cannabis incense or wine, for sedation, using special tools, like one called the Yava Vaktra Salaka, making a specific incision near the pupil, and then carefully removing the opaque lens material.
Wow.
Even post-operative care was covered, keeping the patient still, avoiding things like sneezing.
The level of detail is stunning for eye surgery that long ago. Anything else?
They also covered male urogenital problems quite extensively, things like urethral strictures. Sesruda talked about using dilators, syringes for irrigation, catheters.
Right.
And for strictures, he suggested dilating tubes, or even a surgical incision on the underside of the penis as an alternative.
It's just undeniable the Sesruda Samhita is a monumental piece of work for early anatomy and surgery.
It truly is. And it's important to remember, this text is foundational to the Ayurvedic tradition, which is still practiced today.
A living tradition with ancient roots. Okay, from India, let's shift focus. How about ancient Egypt, another major early civilization?
Yes, Egypt. Definitely another key player. Archaeological evidence points to anatomical studies being important there from, well, way back, maybe 3100 BCE, right up to the 2nd century AD. And crucially, they were the first ones we know of to actually write down their anatomical findings.
Written records that old are gold dust. So who are the key figures, or what texts should we know about?
Well, there's an account by Manetho mentioning a Pharaoh Djer as an early anatomist, supposedly writing a book on practical medicine and anatomy. Though, whether a pharaoh personally did dissections is debated.
Right, could be symbolic.
Could be.
Mm-hmm.
But it shows anatomy was valued early on. Later, in Alexandria, which became a huge center of learning, figures like Herophilus and Erostratus were performing human dissections. We'll probably touch on them again with Greece.
Okay, so what specific Egyptian ideas about the body do we know?
They used the term metu. It seems to have been a broad term for channels or vessels. Could mean blood vessels, ducts, tendons, maybe even nerves. The Ebers Papyrus mentions 52 metu going to the head.
And what was central to their system?
The heart. The heart metu was seen as the absolute center of the body's system, crucially important.
More important than the brain, for instance.
At that stage, yes, it seems so. Though, speaking of the brain, we have the Edwin Smith Papyrus.
Ah, yes, I've heard of that one.
It's incredibly important. Contains the first known written use of the word brain. And it doesn't just name it. It describes the meninges, the membranes around the brain, and the cerebrospinal fluid. It details head injuries in a very logical, anatomical order. Really quite medical in its approach.
Fascinating. They identified the brain and its covering so early. Did their famous mummification practices help their knowledge?
Almost certainly. Well, the main goal wasn't scientific study. The whole process of removing and preserving organs must have given them a pretty good hands-on understanding of internal anatomy and where things were located.
An unintended consequence, perhaps. Okay, so from Egypt's practical, if somewhat accidental anatomical insight, let's head over to Mesopotamia. Their approach was quite different, wasn't it?
Very different, yes. In Mesopotamia, understanding the body, or at least parts of it, was deeply connected to divination.
Divination? How so?
Specifically, a practice called extispicy, reading omens from the entrails of sacrificed animals. And the most important organ for this was the liver. Hepatoscopy, divination using the liver.
The liver. Why the liver?
They believed the liver was the seat of the soul, the center of life, thought, and emotion. This idea actually predates the heart taking on that central role in some other cultures.
The liver as the seat of the soul. Okay, so how did that lead to anatomical study?
Well, to teach priests how to interpret the omens correctly, how to read the liver, they made clay models of livers. Some of these models date back to around 2000 BCE.
Clay liver models, like teaching aids.
Exactly. Anatomical teaching models, essentially, but for divination. There's a famous one in the British Museum. It's kind of amazing. Thousands of years before modern anatomy textbooks, they had these models.
That's incredible. What kind of details did they show?
Priests noted all sorts of variations on the surface of sacrificed livers, bumps, marks, the shape of different parts, and they developed a whole terminology for these features.
And this terminology?
Here's the really surprising part. Some of that terminology actually influenced modern anatomical language for the liver. They talked about right and left wings for the lobes, the river edge for the gallbladder fossa, the river of the liver for the umbilical fissure.
No way! Terms from divination finding their way into modern medicine.
It seems so. They named parts like the caudate lobe the middle of the liver, and its processes had names like finger of the liver. Because modern liver surgery often relies on these surface landmarks, the ancient focus on them, even for divination, provided a kind of early map that resonates even today.
That's a truly unexpected connection between ancient religion and modern science. Amazing.
All right, let's move westward now to ancient Greece. Often seen as the cradle of Western science. What was their story with anatomy?
Greece is interesting. You had figures like Aristotle in the 4th century BCE doing animal dissections, which was important, but systematic human dissection, generally it wasn't really done.
Generally not. Were there exceptions?
Yes. A very significant, though possibly short-lived exception happened in Alexandria, Egypt, which was then a major center of Greek learning around the early 3rd century BCE.
You mentioned Alexandria before with Egypt.
Right. This is where Herophilus and Erastratus come in again. They are credited with being the first to systematically dissect human bodies. And there are ancient accounts, quite disturbing ones, suggesting they might have even performed vivisections dissecting living criminals.
Vivisection, dissecting living people. That's deeply unsettling, but anatomically, they must have learned a lot. Immense amounts, yes. Their discoveries about the nervous system, the eye, the heart, and vascular system were groundbreaking for the time.
So, if they made such breakthroughs, why didn't this practice of human dissection continue within Greek science? You said it was short-lived.
That's one of the big questions, really. It's a bit of a mystery why it seemed to stop after them, or at least wasn't widely adopted elsewhere in the Greek world.
Any theories?
Well, traditional Greek attitudes towards the dead body, respect for the skin, maybe certain sacred laws. These cultural factors likely created strong resistance or taboos against cutting open human bodies. So this period in Alexandria seems to have been a unique window that didn't stay open.
A reminder that science doesn't happen in a vacuum. Culture, religion, ethics, they all shape what's possible or acceptable. So if direct dissection was difficult, how did people continue to learn anatomy later on?
Exactly. The challenges of getting cadavers, and especially preserving them for detailed study, were huge hurdles for centuries. This led to a really fascinating development. Anatomical models.
Physical models.
Yeah.
Made of.
Various things. Wax became particularly popular, but also wood, eventually rubber. They were created as three-dimensional teaching tools.
Wax models. I picture those very detailed, maybe slightly creepy old medical displays.
Some definitely fit that description. The 18th century was a real golden age for wax modeling, especially in Italy. You had Gaetano Zumbo in Sicily.
Zumbo, what was his work like?
Incredibly realistic, almost hyper-realistic, focusing on the stages of decomposition after death. He made these wax heads, showing decay in detail. One in Florence even incorporates a real human skull. Quite macabre, but based on direct observation.
Intense. Who else was involved?
Anna Morandi in Bologna was famous for her detailed anatomical models. And then Felice Fontana in Florence set up a huge workshop at the La Spiccola Museum. Their aim wasn't just medical training, but also public enlightenment.
Educating the public with wax models.
Yes, they wanted to spread anatomical knowledge more widely. Their collection became massive and really influential across Europe.
And wasn't there an even bigger collection made for Vienna?
That's right. Emperor Joseph II was inspired by the Florentine models and commissioned an enormous collection for the Josephina Medical Academy in Vienna. Over 1,100 wax models.
Wow.
It included Paolo Mascagni's cutting-edge research on the lymphatic system, modeled in wax, and a huge, unique set of obstetrical models showing childbirth stages, really unparalleled.
So wax was key. But were there other materials? You mentioned rubber.
Wax was delicate, though. Papier-mâché emerged as a more robust alternative. Jean-François Ameline started using it, but it was really Dr. Louis-Thomas Jerome Auzoux in the early 19th century who perfected it.
Papier-mâché, like the craft material. How did Auzoux make that work for anatomy?
He developed a process using molds to mass-produce models from a special durable papier-mâché mixture. His genius was making them dissectable. You could take them apart layer by layer.
So you could see the relationships between structures.
Exactly. They were lightweight, strong, you could handle them, take them apart, put them back together, and they were meticulously hand-painted with details like nerves and blood vessels. Ozu's models became internationally famous, used in medical schools everywhere.
So he sort of industrialized anatomical model making.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
His factory produced huge numbers, and they were the standard teaching tool for a long time, really until high-quality photography and then computer models started to take over.
It's amazing how ingenuity found ways around the limitations of using real bodies. Now, let's rewind a bit, again, back to the ancient world, but look at a different kind of anatomical representation, votive offerings. What were these?
Right, this is fascinating. In ancient Greece and Rome, people would bring models of body parts made from terracotta, sometimes marble, to temples or sanctuaries.
Models of body parts, why?
They were offerings, maybe thanks for a cure that had happened or a plea for healing that specific body part. Sometimes related to fertility, too, offerings of reproductive organs, for example.
So like a physical prayer or thank you note shaped like the problem area.
That's a good way to put it. Collections like the one Henry Wellcome amassed, now partly in the Science Museum, contain hundreds of these heads, arms, legs, eyes, ears, internal organs.
What can they tell us? Besides the fact that people got sick, obviously.
Well, they give us clues about what ailments were common or particularly worrying. Lots of eyes, for example, suggests eye problems were widespread. Some scholars even try to diagnose conditions based on how the eyes are depicted in the votives.
Really? Like cataracts or other issues?
Possibly. It's speculative, of course, but the sheer number and variety of these votives show us a lot about ancient health concerns and this blend of religious belief and medicine.
It underscores that seeking divine help was a totally normal part of dealing with illness back then, right alongside whatever practical medicine existed.
Absolutely. It wasn't necessarily one or the other. People might visit a physician and make an offering at a shrine. It was all part of the available healthcare landscape.
This has been such a rich tour, seeing all these different ways ancient cultures tried to grasp the human body.
It really has. From Sushruda's ingenious dissection methods in India and the Alexandrian anatomists to Mesopotamia's liver divination, Egypt's papyri, and then the later models and votives, it's incredibly diverse.
Each approach shaped by its own time and place, its own beliefs and technologies.
Exactly. And all these efforts, even the ones that seem strange to us now, like hepatoscopy, they all contributed, piece by piece, to building the foundations of the anatomical knowledge we have today.
They really did lay that groundwork. So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to ponder.
Go on.
Think about how the shifting sands of society, religion, technology, how all these things guided and sometimes limited the ways these ancient peoples explored their own bodies. And then maybe ask yourself, what parallels or what striking differences do we see in how we approach and understand the body and medical knowledge today?
That's a great question. How do our own cultural lenses shape our understanding now?
It's a story that's still unfolding, isn't it? The endless fascination with the human form.
It certainly is. And the journey of discovery never really ends.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and please keep joining us here on The Deep Dive, brought to you by the All Sorts podcast.